So Dark Deity is a turn-based tactical RPG in a similar style to Fire Emblem. So I decided to do a blind playthrough on my Twitch channel, link in the description, and I decided to chronicle my journeys here. So the first chapter of Dark Deity, we're introduced to some students of an officer's academy. We're introduced to the students of Irving, who is a warrior, Garrick, who is a ranger, Marion, who is a cleric, and Alden, who is a mage. The group is preparing for a trial so that the seniors can graduate the academy and join the army. So I start by having Irving provoke the enemies, and then have Garrick and Alden follow behind and pick off the survivors. As I slowly make my way over to the boss, Irving takes all the damage in this chapter, and we finally get up to the boss, who is Irving's older brother. He's a melee unit with a good amount of evasion. As the boss is locked to run range, I decided to cheese the boss with Garrick and Alden. At the end of the turn, the boss is at low health, so I decided, why not? I send in Marion the cleric to go land the killing blow because I thought that'd be funny. And the chapter is won. We're told that instead of just the seniors graduating and joining the army, everybody's getting drafted into the war effort, and we meet our superior officers of Bianca and Lincoln. No association to me. Chapter 2 of Dark Deity starts the group heading to the local town to try and recruit more soldiers for the war effort. Initially, nobody volunteers, but then a girl named Sia offers to join. Seeing this, Elias joins her, as he doesn't want her to go at it alone. Sia is a thief, while Elias is a new class called an Adept, which is a unit with high physical and magical attack. While all the recruits are at the tavern, bandits attack. Lincoln and Bianca aren't here yet, so we have to fend off the bandits for 7 turns while they return. Elias is fairly tanky, at least the tankiest of the units I have. So I have him and Irving provoke the initial enemies, and I have Garrick and Alden try and land the finishing blows. I send in Sia to try and kill off some archers. She has fairly low damage, but high speed, meaning she'll constantly double hit, and will likely evade enemy hits. After an early scare with Sia almost dying, I decided to keep my ranged units back, as I only need to survive for the 7 turns, not kill everybody. I have Elias and Irving each provoke one side as the enemies come at us, with countless archers and swordsmen. On turn 7, there are only 2 enemies left, so I send in my units to attack the last 2 who haven't moved. They're like the boss enemies of this chapter, which are, really high damage, could probably kill some of my units, but it's turn 7. So I send them in to attack, and end the turn, and that's when I realize survive 7 turns includes the enemy turn. Luckily, the enemies decided to attack 2 different units, so no one ended up dying. Bianca and Lincoln finally arrive back, and we decide to delay our return to the king so we can chase after the bandits who we just fought. Chapter 3 of Dark Deity sees our group following the bandits through the woods to their hideout. We get attacked along the way by some of the bandits. And I'm going to be honest, this map is kind of underwhelming. The bandits are mostly split into 2 groups, one to the east and one to the south, with just a couple people in between. After clearing out the initial enemies, I decided to split my party into 2 groups. One to fight off the bandits to the east, and the other one pushes south towards the boss. Lincoln, Sia, Alden, and Irving head south towards the boss, while the rest of the people clear up the remaining enemies and then rejoin the group. The boss was an absolute pushover, and we end up continuing our journey to take out this bandit group. We find a map that shows that their base is actually an abandoned mansion, and we head there to finally finish off the bandits. In Chapter 4 of Dark Deity, our group heads to the mansion to take out the bandit group. When the group arrives, they find that the bandits have kidnapped 2 people. The mansion has enemies on 2 sides, and the group is stuck in the middle. The group has to then make their way up either side of the mansion to the boss in the middle. I choose to split the group so that each side can free their respective hostage, but unfortunately, as I send Irving to open up one of the doors, he's obliterated by some very strong mages. And this is where I learned how death works in this game. If a character were to lose all their HP, they leave the fight and have a stat decrease in the future because they sprained their ankle or lost a finger or whatever. So, I choose to reset because I'm already having a hard enough time and a stat loss is not going to help. As the reset, I follow a similar strategy of splitting up the people, but I sent Bianca in with Irving as she has high magical resistance. I free the prisoners, but Elias is too good at murdering people and ends up killing so many mages that they're able to slowly chip him down throughout the turn and kill him. Finally, I reset one more time and just say screw it. I move everybody as one massive force. I start by freeing the prisoner on the left, whose name is Sophia, who is an archer, and she has a pet ferret named Butters. He's adorable. She has high magical resistance, so I use her. So I put her to use as the group now pushes to the right to free the next prisoner. The lady's name is Sloane, and she is a sort of like an anti-magic mage, stellar magical resistance, but also good magic, base. I finally decided to split the group to take on the two different sides, as each side is a treasure chest. To the right, there are a lot of melee enemies, so I send in the OG squad of Irving, Garrick, Alden, and Marin to take it out, while the rest of the group makes their way to the left side to deal with all the mages. They're able to push their way in, and we get our first promotion, which is Lincoln, who gets level 10. I turn him into a priest, as he then gains the ability to heal from 2 spaces away. I send in Irving then to kill the boss, which also allows him to promote, and he becomes a knight. Battle ends with the group checking on the prisoners and looking around the mansion. In Chapter 5 of Dark Deity, the group has now secured the mansion from the bandits and are met by 2 people. Both are asking if the group has found a stone in the mansion, as it was a family heirloom. The group is suspicious that 2 different people want the same item and are using the same story. Finally, the very obviously clearly evil wizard dude reveals himself as a necromancer and raises an undead army to take the stone by force. We join up with the other people who didn't raise the army to try and kill us and fight our way through the mansion. Here we are introduced to 3 new characters: Brooke the rogue, Samara the priest, and Sarah the mage. All 3 of them are starting above level 10, so they're instantaneously promoted. I turn Brooke into a raider because they have a passive that intrigues me that has a 3% chance of finding a stat up item after every kill. Just a note, as of recording this, I'm about 17 chapters in, used to every chapter, and have not gotten a stat up item. I turned Sarah into a battle mage, since it seemed like there were some good combos with the skills, and make Samara a guardian. These new units are almost double the level of my other units, so they are very strong and can carry me. We start the fight with the groups on opposite sides with a wall between them. After pushing through the initial enemies, there are a series of portals that we just have to go through to continue on. After taking a minute to figure out where each portal goes, I try to maintain a balanced number of people on each side. I push through most of the enemies with Bianca and Brooke on the left and with Irving on the right. While I push my way through, I try to range cheese as many units as possible to keep my melee units alive. During the fight, Bianca gets promoted to the Gale, which is one of my favorite and possibly one of the best classes in the entire game, but I could obsess about that in a different video. Finally, our group makes it to the final group of enemies. I send Brooke in to provoke the enemies on the left while reinforcements make their way to her. The boss attacks Brooke, which allows her to counter for about half the boss's health. I then send Garrick in to attack the boss. I see that he can kill, but it's like a 50% chance to hit. I decided to just go for it, and he actually hits, and that's why I learned this map's win condition was killing the boss, and lost a lot of free experience. This may make the coming chapters harder, but I'm not going through that level again. With the boss defeated, the mansion returns to normal, and the group learns of aspects. These are items that give the holder power, and this was what the necromancer was after. Sarah and Samara decide to lead the group to continue on the journey, while Brooke stays behind with us as we head back to the kingdom to face the king's wrath. Chapter 6 of Dark Deity starts with a conversation between the necromancer and some other evil guy who seems to be his boss. The necromancer has to explain how he got beaten up by a bunch of random knights who are fresh out of the academy. And then we jump to our heroes, who are required by the king to complete a trial to gain back his trust after disobeying his orders. The group is tasked with taking down a group of rebels who are attacking caravans on the road. After refusing to join the rebels, we have to fight them. And much like several previous chapters, we're stuck in the middle with enemies on both sides. I decided to divide the group to deal with the enemies, but I end up sending Elias a bit too far, and he gets attacked by several people, and none of them end up missing him, resulting in the 3rd reset of the game. I follow a similar strategy to the first time, except I keep Elias a bit further back. And now it's time to talk about a lot of promotion that happened, since everyone was like level 8 or 9 coming out of the last map. So basically everybody gets promoted this map. The first to get the promotion is Sia, who are turned into the Stalker class. It gives guaranteed hit if the enemy is at low health and has a small chance to insta-kill, but the insta-kill is actually a 300 damage hit. And yes, you can crit on that hit. I've seen it before. And it's important to note that's a 300 damage hit because in the future there are some enemies, some like bosses, that have more than 300 HP. Soon after that, Sophia gets her promotion as well. I changed her into the Witch Hunter class, which makes her even more of a mage killer. Extra high magical resistance and bonus damage against mages. After a little bit more combat, we get yet another potion, which is Sloane. I turn her into an Arcanist. They get a boost in damage if she doesn't move, as well as just much better stats. Finally, we get yet another promotion. Elias finally hits level 10 after, a little bit of work. I want to try and mix things up and use all the different classes in case I ever want to do a run again, just so I know what they are, what they do. So I turn Elias into a Reverie instead of the Gale, which is still one of my favorite classes. But I turn him into a Reverie. It turns him into a tanky hammer user who can heal for a percentage of damage that he deals. Garrick is the next one, and I keep trying to mix things up, and so turn him into a Drifter, as he naturally has a crit boost passive, and Drifters are all about dealing more crits and dealing more crit damage. Finally, the last person is Alden, who gets promoted in this chapter. I turn him into a Conjurer who has a lot of HP, deals bonus damage equal to their current HP, and then can heal for a portion of their damage dealt. Figured I'd keep him as more of like a self-sustaining damage dealer. We clear out the rest of the chapter really easily because now all of our people are promoted, aside from Marin, because she's a healer and it's hard to level her up. And with that, we've completed the chapter, and we have gone back into the King's good graces, and so he sends us on our next assignment, which is to help defend the town of Redfield.
Chapter 8 of Dark Deity starts with our group arriving at Red Hill proper, where the town is on fire and the army is killing civilians. Caius joins our group officially, and I turn him into an archer. The goal of this chapter is to beat 30 enemies. The enemies come from 3 different directions, making me split my party again. I send a small squad to the east to deal with the enemies from that side, and the majority of the enemy forces are straight ahead, or a starting location, so I send most of my units to fight them head on. I charge in and don't actually check how much damage my units will take, resulting in the enemies getting up on Elias and killing him. After the reset, I realize Elias isn't that tanky yet and play more cautiously. The goal is just to kill enemies and doesn't have a time limit, so I can be safe and turtle up a bit. I send Sia, Bianca, and my mages to go kill the high evasion sword people, while my archers and most of my melee people fight off the main force to the north. After taking down the units to the east and most of the north, I send some of my units to fight the few enemies to the west and try and finish off last soldiers needed. Realizing that I've killed 29 enemies, I milk the last turn for as much EXP as possible to make up for what I lost in Chapter 5. Then I finish off the last soldier, and the chapter ends with us getting surrounded. Prepared to fight to the death, we're ready for our last fight, when suddenly Sarah and Samara show up. Turns out they're actually princesses from the enemy kingdom, and they rescue us from certain demise. We decide to join their cause of gathering and protecting the aspects and stopping a bigger calamity in the current war. As we head off with Sarah and Samara, we're spotted by another battalion of our army, who reports us as fleeing with enemy royalty. We're deemed deserters and traitors by the nation and are being hunted down.
Chapter 7 of Dark Deity sees our group arriving at Redwood, which is already under attack. The enemy is attempting to destroy the aqueducts, and so we have to go stop them. Here we're introduced to the next member of our group, Benji. Benji's a fun character, but he isn't that great of a unit. I turn him into a Dragoon since his passive allows him to gain more crit chance, and it synergizes well with the class. The group then splits into 2, starting on opposite sides of the map with Benji in the middle surrounded by enemies. We have to take down people who are destroying the aqueducts as soon as possible. I have the 2 groups immediately push south, while I have Irving split off from one of the groups to meet up with Benji. Marin promotes during this initial push, and so I decided to turn to an Acolyte, which is like a more aggressive, damaging healer. I keep pushing inward, but take a risk with one of the enemies, and Brooke ends up getting hit with a 40% chance and killed.
Alright, let's do this one last time.
I try again, and try to be a little bit safer this time, but a couple of unlucky hits then brings down Garrick.
Alright, people, let's do this one last time.
Try one more time, being extra careful this time. But still, I have to move pretty fast, as the enemies are going to continue to break down the aqueducts each turn. So I send Bianca to the middle, as there's a bunch of mages, and the groups continue to push south. I try and take out the moving enemies first, and then have any of my ranged units cheese the stationary ones. Just as I'm reaching near the end, Sloan gets double hit by some sword dude and dies.
Okay, let's do this one last time, yeah? For real this time.
I push my way south with the two groups, promote Marin for the fourth time. Bianca takes out enemies in the middle, ranged cheese stationary people, take out the moving enemies, be extra careful with the dual-wielding guys, now I know how terrifying they are, finish off the guys beating up the aqueducts, finish the level. There. Finally done. Only 3 resets. At the end of the level, we finally meet a guy named Caius, who says that the enemy is also attacking the actual town and that the aqueduct was simply a distraction. So we make our way to the town proper and end the chapter.
Chapter 9 of Dark Deity starts with the group meeting with Corvin, who helps the group get to meet a man named Arumia, who is a warrior of legend who holds an aspect. Once we get there, we meet up with Helena, a monk who has traveled across the world to challenge Arumia to a fight. She joins our party as we now have to fight Arumia before we can talk to him. But before the battle starts, we have to choose Corvin and Helena's promotions. I turn Corvin into a thief, which gives him a ridiculous amount of speed, and a skill that means that the more speed he has, the more armor penetration he has. Then I turned Helena into a defender, as she starts with spectacular defenses, especially in magic defense, and the defender just makes her even tankier. The chapter starts with the group being divided into 4, which is especially problematic as I only have 3 healers, so one of the groups is going to have to go without one. So I put all my best units into a group that doesn't have the healers. The map is divided into the shape of an H, so the groups to the north and south can meet up in the middle and then attack the final boss from both sides. The one annoying part about this chapter is that I'm required to take new units, and they're in a fixed location, so I have to kind of work around that. I lure the enemies into the starting area, and then take them out quickly, and after a short scare with Benji, I swiftly make my way to the center of the map. There are 3 advanced class enemies, so I draw in some of the enemies with Helena and Bianca, while Sia provokes the other one. Bianca chips down the boss, and Sia heads in and crits for the kill. The group then talks to Arumia about his aspect and their quest. Arumia decides to join, and I turn him into a Gale as I now know the power of the Gale. In Chapter 10 of Dark Deity, the group heads to a Calamity Temple, which is said to hold countless other aspects. When the group gets to the temple, they see that it's guarded by a lady named Vesta. She is a priest of the temple tasked with guarding the aspects within. As the group arrives, the temple gets attacked by a number of reanimated people, and we decide to help defend the temple. Before the battle starts, we have to choose a promotion for Vesta. I choose to make her an Inquisitor, as they're tanky healers, and she's naturally tanky and it pairs well with her personal skill. The group starts out in the middle with enemies attacking from 3 main directions. Luckily, I have 6 frontline fighters in my team, and the passageway is only 2 tiles wide, so I follow the enemies in, allowing my group to stay relatively safe while killing off the enemies. For this chapter, I have to survive for 8 turns, so Vesta can channel a spell to purge all the undead. While tanking the original group, I notice the enemies moving to a small 1-tile wide side entrance. I send Irving to cover that entrance while Vesta takes over his place on the front lines. I'm able to quickly clear the majority of the initial waves of enemies, but reinforcements soon come. At turn 6, I send some of my extra members out to help clear out the enemies from the small passage to the north, while the remaining spawn camp the reinforcements. On the last turn, I make a stupid decision and send Sophia into unnecessary danger, and she gets taken out. Since this is the last turn of the chapter, I decide to just accept the damages and finish out the chapter. As she only uses 5 health, which is not that important in the long run. If the unit dies, but they don't receive a significant stat drop, nor do multiple people die in the chapter, I'll just accept it rather than reset, as it would take me forever to clear all these without a single person dying. With that chapter over, Vesta cleanses the temple and thanks our group. She decides to join our group permanently and gifts us with the aspects stored within the temple. We are then told that our best course of action is to head to Varroa and meet the Order of Eternals who could help them with the mystery of the Necromancer and the Aspects. Chapter 11 of Dark Deity starts with the group caught in the middle of a battle between the two main armies. They have to fight their way through and defeat the Necromancer, who is at the very end of the map. And this will allow them to save the armies and potentially clear their name, because, they're still in trouble for deserting. Going into this, I thought this was going to be a three-way fight between my group, the Amorians, and the Delians. Nope, everyone just hates me. So I'm told to try and avoid as many casualties as possible, and just rush the Necromancer. So the battle starts, and I send basically all my team straight north to do as the game requested, and kill as few people as possible. Then I immediately get flanked on both sides, so I decided to split my party three-way, with the majority going to the left and right, while the remaining head straight for the boss. As the groups near the Necromancer, all the paths converge, and I send in Arumia to finish the fight as he arrives at the Necromancer. The battle ends, and we jump right into a cutscene where Irving meets with his brother, Sterling, and they put aside their differences to strike down a Necromancer. Necromancer was injured, but lives and manages to flee, leaving Irving's brother dead and Irving badly wounded. The group finally gets to the harbor and get a ship so they can set sail to meet with the council and discuss further actions. Chapter 12 of Dark Deity starts with the group on board the ship. They meet the captain as well as two other travelers on board. The captain of the ship is a man named Ford, who is a smuggler, a drunk, and his class is a thief. The other two travelers, there is a lady named Iris, who is an adept, and she is sailing alongside Monroe, a mage and one of nobility. While on the path to Varroa, the ship is attacked by storm elementals, possibly drawn due to the three adepts on board, so we have to defend the ships from the elementals before they sink it. The battle starts, and I have to promote the three new characters. I start by turning Monroe into a conjurer, as he has massive HP, and then skills that further boost his HP. Ford I turned to a duelist, as it seems like an interesting class, and I just haven't tried it before. And Iris I turned to a surge, as it goes well with her passive, and I didn't want to make everybody into a Gale, no matter how good the Gale class is. I want to make something different. The battle starts, and all of the elementals are starting far away from the ship. The only way to take them out is to draw them in by putting a unit in their attack range. Since storm elementals are ranged enemies, I send my own ranged units to provoke them, while the melee units push to the back of the ship to kill the enemies that are on board. Things start off well, but I send Corvin a little bit too far forward, and he gets hit by some fairly unlikely hits and dies. I reset and now know the strat. Monroe, Alden, Sophia, and Sloane are all on the edges of the boat killing the elementals, while the rest of the group pushes forward. The group soon defeats all of the enemies, and just in the nick of time, as the boat was around 20% condition, they gave me an achievement for getting the boat dangerously close to dying and still winning. The chapter ends with Monroe and Iris deciding to join the group on their path to Varroa. Chapter 13 of Dark Deity starts with the group finally reaching Varroa and meeting with the Order. Only Irving and Vesta are allowed to enter the Order, while the others must remain outside. Irving's father is ahead of the Order and catches up with his son as he has lost contact with his family when he joined the Order. They then address the matter of the Necromancer and the next steps. Irving is told that he must complete the Soul Trial, which will tell him all he needs to know about the Necromancer. Before they must first travel to a temple to find a device that will guide them to the Soul Trial. Maeve of the Mystic Council decides to join the party alongside her companion Thalen. Before the next chapter starts, I have to decide their promotions. Maeve is an archer whose personal skill increases dodge upon kill. I decided to turn to a strider as they're like glass cannons, but they have very high dodge. And Thalen is an adept, and you know what that means. He's gonna be a Gale. I decided Gale would actually be probably best with him, as his personal skill is probably one of the best of the whole game. Any one attack, Thalen can only take up to 30% of his maximum HP in a single hit. This, combined with the somewhat squishy, very high damage, high evasion Gale, will quickly make him one of my best units. Now on to the actual chapter. The group is heading through the woods on their way to the temple when they're suddenly attacked. Before the group can react, a man named Ren shows up and kills off the scouts. While the scouts are gone, the rest of the enemy have been alerted. The group prepares for an escape, and Ren decides to join the party. Ren is a rogue whose personal skill gives armor penetration, based on his mastery skill. I turned him into a stalker like Sia, but looking back on it, the better choice would have been Thief, as it syncs better with his personal skill. Now the actual battle starts. The group needs to make their way to the north to flee within 25 turns before more reinforcements show up. I push forward into the river, as that's my only way to get north from the starting location. As I get my units into the river, some enemies show up behind us, so I send some of my people back to defend. I take out some of the enemies behind us, but can't kill them all before the turn ends. Kaius ends up getting caught out and hit by 3 consecutive 47% chances and dies. I choose to reset, as this is only like the third turn of the battle. So this time I send more people to defend our flank. I kill all of the enemies and then continue pushing forward. There's another path off the river that has more enemies, but also some loot. I send a small squad to take out the enemies while the majority of my force continues to push up the river. It's not until many turns into the battle that I realize there are chests on this map, and I left one sitting by the entrance. The majority of the army reconverges while I send Irving and Sophia to loot the final chest. While waiting for Irving and Sophia to get the chest, I surround an archer with people so he can only attack my units at 2 range and cannot move. I then tactically place Vesta and Helena so they can get bombarded by countless arrows for experience. Finally, on turn 24, I finish the chapter and escape. The chapter ends with the group finally reaching the temple. Chapter 14 of Dark Deity starts with the group entering the temple to retrieve the artifact they need for the soul trial. Inside is a massive number of units, multiple path splits, and a boss who stole my strategy of being a Windrunner, which is the upgraded Gale. The temple is split into 2 paths, with the center path being blocked by doors, so it can only be opened from the side paths. I split the group to clear all the enemies while trying my best to avoid all the different floor traps in this temple, but unfortunately the first run ends pretty quickly after Vesta gets hit by some healers who I didn't think would do so much damage. So I reset, keep my healers in the back line, and try to keep everybody fully healed. The group continues to push up the sides, opening doors and looting treasures. I leave Alden by the first door so he could range choose some of the enemies, and the party gets split further as they go to open the doors while the others approach the boss. I take out the boss and realize the goal is to obtain an item so I can milk the last enemy for as much EXP as possible. Finally, I go and pick up the item and the chapter ends. Psych! That was only part 1 of the map! Once you obtain the item, the whole temple begins to fill with a poisonous gas while more enemy reinforcements come in from the entrance where you need to escape. I rush everybody towards the exit before setting up a choke point to fall and defeat the enemies. Unfortunately, the enemies do more than I expect, and Brooke ends up going down, but she only has a minor stat drop, so I end up just going with it. Eventually, I defeat all of the enemies, and I get my units to the exit in time. The chapter now actually ends with the group boarding their ship again to sail towards where the soul trial actually is with their new talking compass thing. Chapter 15 of Dark Deity starts with the group finally reaching the Trial of the Soul, and when we enter, we're presented with ourselves. The Trial of the Soul is challenging the exact copies of your whole team. To prove your worth, you had to fight yourselves. This chapter is very similar to a chapter that I once completed in Fire Emblem Awakening. The thing is that chapter in Awakening was a post-game chapter, and I only managed to beat it with some overpowered skills and some luck. So this is going to be fun. I have some of my best units, but that also means I'm setting up the toughest enemies. I try to provoke the enemies with my tankiest units, but my own units are too strong, and my first attempt ends with Brooke dying and getting a big stat drop. Okay, I reset, and on the second try, Vesta nearly gets taken out by herself and Monroe, but she dodges a 91 accuracy move. It starts going well once again, but once again, Brooke gets taken out. As a minor stat drop and this level is unrelentingly difficult, I just go with it. When the level is mostly over,
Thalen ends up getting taken out, and it's a decent stat drop, but I think this is about the best I can do. I've gotten pretty lucky so far, so I just keep going. Finally, all the enemies are defeated, and we finish the Trial of the Soul. With the trial completed, Irving is granted access to the inner chamber where he speaks to a god, I think? Irving is then granted some knowledge, as well as a bunch more aspects to aid his journey. With that all set, the group hops back on the boat and sets sail to end the war and stop the necromancer. In Chapter 16 of Dark Deity, the group has to head back to the mainland, and they decide to meet with a contact to learn how the war has gone while they're gone. And they learn that the King of Delia has kind of gone bad with power, and he needs to be stopped. First, the group needs to find a place to set up as their base of operations, as everyone kind of wants them dead. They trek to a mountain where there is a cavern that they use as a base. When they arrive, the cavern is well kept and furnished. The group then learns that there is still a dwarf who lives there, whose name is Fenton. Fenton allows the group to stay in the cave if they help him get back his inheritance. The group agrees. They head deeper into the cave to find a pile of gold being blocked by a dragon. Now, before the chapter starts, I have to choose Fenton's promotion. Fenton is a knight, and so I turn him into a barbarian, as he has a ton of strength, but like 0 speed. And it pairs well with his personal skill. Finally, the chapter starts, and it is the whole group versus a single dragon with 2.5k HP. 2,500 HP. The dragon does an AoE move and a single target move every turn. Now, if you remember many chapters ago, I mentioned that Sia has the Fatal skill, which does 300 damage and doesn't instantly kill people, and has a small chance to insta-kill, but the insta-kill is actually a 300 damage hit, and yes, you can crit on that hit. I've seen it before, and it's important to note that's a 300 damage hit because in the future there are some enemies, some like bosses, that have more than 300 HP. Now is where it's relevant, because she activates Fatal during this boss fight and chunks the boss. This battle actually goes rather smoothly, as I move my characters out of the range of the dragon's AoEs and strike whenever possible. There are a lot of close calls though, as the dragon does a ton of damage, but I'm slowly able to chip away at its health bar. And soon enough the dragon is dead and the chapter ends. Fenton splits part of his inheritance with the group and allows them to stay in the cavern. The group then plans their next attack to help them take out the King of Delia. In Chapter 17 of Dark Deity, the group has a plan to take out the King of Delia, and that plan starts with a prison break. Way back in Chapter 6, we took down some rebels. Now 11 chapters later, we're breaking them out so they can help us take out the king. We arrive at the prison and are told to release as many prisoners as we can and take out all the soldiers before they execute any of the prisoners. I was a bit disappointed when I freed the first group of prisoners and they just left instead of helping. The group reconverges and they approach the area where the executions are. The group bursts in to take out almost all the guards. Finally, there is one archer left, and I decide to train my units the only way I know how, having them be brutally shot by arrows to the point that they are more wood than they are flesh. I send in Sia first, since she can take a hit and likely evade the shots, and the first hit is an immediate crit and Sia dies. But it's not a major stat loss, so I just keep going. I then train my healers, Lincoln, Faust, and Festa, by helping them keep Helena alive as she had turned into a human pincushion. After 76 turns, I finally have my healers and Helena promoted. I decided to promote everybody into the next in their lines, so I turned Faust and Lincoln into prophets, allowing them to have 3 range heals and more dodge. And I turned Vesta into Crusader, which allows for more healing after attacking her, turning into almost like an aggro healer. Finally, I turned Helena into a Sentinel, which gives nearby allies extra defense and attack. Finally, I saved the 2 people who are waiting to be executed for 70 turns. The first one is Alexa, a warrior, I turn to a Dragoon, as her personal skill and the class skill both boost damage the further the unit moves. And finally I rescue Rose, who is a Ranger. I turn her into an Archer, but I don't really plan on using her, so I didn't really think about that option. After saving everybody, the group escapes as reinforcements arrive. With the news of the prison break led by Irving, King Varric prepares his revenge. Chapter 18 of Dark Deity starts with the group getting word that King Varric ordered an attack on Brookstead, the home of the original 4 protagonists and where Irving's mother is currently living. Irving decides to head there even though it's probably a trap, and the group decides to join him as they head to go and defend Brookstead. When they arrive, they see that the town is full of enemy soldiers, but there is one person who is trying to defend the town, a person named Liberty, who is a mage. Before a battle starts, I have to choose a promotion. I decided to turn into a battle mage since it pairs well with her personal skill. Someone is like the anti-magic mage, and Liberty is the anti-physical mage, with a stupid high amount of defense. The chapter starts, and the group is immediately split into 2 or 3 groups. I start with a small group in each of the 3 areas, and as I begin taking out the enemies, I get very frustrated with the enemies on the right-hand side, as they are very high evasion, so I decided to choose to just reset and try a different strategy. After I reset, I just ignore the entire right side, as the enemies just are too evasive, and decided to just push down the middle and the left-hand side. I take out the enemies, and I attempt to reunite with Liberty, who's on the other side of the... While pushing my way through the map, Phelan, Bianca, and Fenton promote. I turn Fenton into a champion, which makes it so he can't double enemies, but all the extra speed is put into just sheer damage. I then turn Phelan and Bianca into Windrunners, the upgraded Gale, which is the best promotion ever, and gives them more chances to deal bonus damage. With these new promotions, I finally deal with the original high evasion enemies that I skipped off, and finally finish off the chapter when I reunite with Liberty. We learn that the soldiers kidnapped Irving's mother, and the group decides that they need to rally the citizens so they can gain the forces to attack the capital to both save Irving's mother and the country as a whole. In Chapter 19 of Dark Deity, the group heads into a major town during a festival. They decide that now is the best time to rally the people of Delia to revolt and overthrow their king. This goes well, but soon after the speech, the group gets surrounded by enemy soldiers. Now, this map is a pain. The map is completely empty with enemies on both sides and an escape route on either side past the enemies. I start by grouping up my units and turtling slowly towards the northwestern side. The issue is that the enemies on the opposite sides quickly arrive and the group is surrounded as I try and chip away at their tanky units. After I realize the run is dead, I decide to reset and come up with a new strategy. This time I decide to rush to the southwest, as there are some squishy mages and I should find an opening to get through. So my best units into the fray to distract most of the enemies while my other ones try and sneak around to escape. Things start off pretty well, but then Rumia, Helena, and Fenton all go down at the same turn due to some unlucky hits. I reset again, but now I've perfected the strategy. I rush down south and make a wall with my tankiest units, so I only need to get a single unit to the escape point of the chapter. After some weird movement, I'm finally able to get Phelan to the escape point, and the chapter finishes. Psych! This is another weird chapter. This is the only chapter where the escape point requires you to escape with each unit individually. So now I'm stuck in a bad position with one of my best units gone. I panic and rush all my units to exit as soon as possible, trying to keep everybody alive and the enemies distracted. I keep my tankiest units to try and hold off the swarm of enemies, and somehow I manage to get to the exit with minimal losses, and the chapter ends with the group getting a message from the Necromancer. They said they probably have to finish off the Necromancer before they go for the king. In Chapter 20 of Dark Deity, the group arrives at the mountain to find Akmenos at the top. Irving confronts him, and Akmenos creates a barrier between Irving and the rest of his group. The Akmenos then summons in an army to take down the rest of the group. The chapter starts and it's weird, since I didn't actually bring Irving with me, and this big climactic fight is actually rather boring, as now it's just my group versus the enemies, and Akmenos is just kind of chilling at the top, doing some weak attacks every turn. Now the group is divided into two different groups, who have to push down south and defeat the enemies, which somehow hurts Necromancer. The battle starts and it is immediately intense, as Monroe nearly gets killed by a crit from a mage, but then he immediately crits back, kills the enemy, and gets promotion. I decided to turn Monroe into a wizard, as his mastery skill now increases magic, and his magic increases his power more. Basically, Monroe's best stat further increases his magic, and his magic even further increases his damage. This is easily his best final class, no matter what you try and build him as. I continue to push down south on each side. One side is very magic-heavy enemies, and the other one is very physical-heavy enemies. Luckily, most of the enemies aren't too tough, so my units just destroy everything, and this map is basically just free EXP to allow more of my units to promote. Speaking of promotion, more people get promoted this level. The first one is Caius, the one-shot machine. I turn him into a sniper, which boosts his accuracy after moving, and now allows him to attack from 3 range. The group continues to push south, but it isn't too hard because my Windrunners kind of decimate everything, and Helena can tank any hits, and so nothing can really get past my units. I try to level up my non-max promoted units, and the first one to get promoted is Sia, who reaches level 30. I turn into an assassin, which boosts her crit chance after getting kills, and boosts her crit damage the more rogues I deploy. Now, I don't actually use any more rogues for this entire playthrough, it's just Sia, but this does give me some ideas for some fun playthroughs. Soon after, Sloan then promotes. I also turn her into a wizard because it's just like a really good class. And then the final one is Liberty, who I turn into an Aegis, which is the upgrade of her Battle Mage class and just makes her even more defensive. Eventually I'm able to clear out enough enemies, then Akmenos dies and the chapter ends, kind of anticlimactically. As the group is about to kill off Akmenos, he suddenly disappears, leaving only his staff. Irving then finds his mother, and the group decides to head back to their base. They then plan their next attack on Delia. Chapter 21 of Dark Deity starts with the group who decides that their next big plan is to take Red Hill and the newly constructed fortress in it. Knowing how basically everybody hates Varric, we decide that if we rush the leader, the enemies will probably surrender. So the chapter starts, and the group is put in the far corner of the fortress. We have to work our way room by room until we can get to the back middle where the leader is. I start by sending my main force straight back, as it's the most direct route to the boss, and then I send a small army to the east to clear out the enemies as it's free XP, and I'm not sure if the enemies can actually leave their rooms. I've later learned they actually can't, but rather be safe than sorry. The first push goes well, but then Thalen gets hit by several different things, as well as a crit, and goes down and gets a big speed drop. Since Thalen is basically hard carrying my team, and is so godlike, and I love him just so much, I decide to reset the fight just to keep him at max strength. I try again, and this time I set Vesta in instead of Thalen, as she physically can't be hurt by these units. I eventually take them out, and I have both Bianca and Thalen pushing north. I split Liberty off as I find a group of enemies who can only do a single point of damage to her, but she can two-shot them, so she can actually get some kills and get some EXP during this map. During the push, the final member of my final team gets their final promotion. Maeve promotes, and I turn her into a Blade Dancer. Blade Dancers get more damage the more dodges they have, and will guarantee a hit if they're under half health. The one downside is that this is the only promotion that I've actually seen where the overall skill growth actually go lower than the previous class. Continuing on, I realize that the final boss's room is just filled with like a million archers. So I set up Caius in the enemy's attack range and have him slowly pick off the enemies. He chips away at the absolutely massive number of archers while the rest of my units clear out the other rooms and prep for the boss. As this method is taking forever, I decided to also throw Sloane and Monroe in the range of archers to triple the number of kills per turn. What I didn't realize is that one of those archers was actually the boss, and Monroe proceeded to one-round him when I wasn't paying attention, and that chapter ends before I realized it, with the group retaking the fort. At the end of the chapter, the group then plans their next major strike, taking on one of the only bridges into the capital. While this is happening, they learn that Elias is trying to figure out the powers of the Necromancer's staff, so he can see if he can actually take the Necromancer out of the staff and properly finish him. In Chapter 22 of Dark Deity, the group attempts to take over the main bridge heading into the capital. With Sophia's help, the group is able to split up and surround the enemies on the bridge. So I put Helena, Maeve, Fenton, Lincoln, Caius, and Sloane on the right side, and then everybody else on my main squad on the left. The left side seems to have like the most number of enemies as well as some of the toughest ones, so I keep my best units on the left side. Now the right side is fairly simple, so I'm just going to kind of mention my strategy and then just not talk about it in the future. On the right side, I simply push my melee units forward, as the enemies can't really do much damage to them. I then use my ranged people to finish off any survivors, and Lincoln heals whoever needs it. Left side just infinitely respawns some really weak and melee units every turn, so I'm just going to kind of not talk about this in the future and just assume they're doing that every single turn. So on the left side, after beating the first few enemies, I'm basically forced to split my team yet again to beat the top and bottom sides with the enemies. Each one of these groups is led by one of my god tier windrunners. I'm telling you, best class in the whole game. As the group starts to push closer to the boss, some of the enemies retreat, which causes massive blob of enemies, and that makes the enemy phase really rough, as most of them are mages, and so they all get to slowly chip away at my team. Luckily, my team manages to survive, and I'm quickly able to clear up the remaining enemies. I consider grinding the infinitely respawning enemies on the right side, but they just give so little EXP, I just can't force myself to actually sit there and grind. So I just finish off the last enemy and end the chapter. After the chapter ends, Sloane goes to Irving and confronts him, telling him that the only way for them to properly reunite Delia after the king is dead is for Sloane's father to also die. After a little debate, because that is Sloane murdering her own dad, the group then decides that they have to go and confront Sloane's father at his home. Chapter 23 of Dark Deity starts with the group arriving at Sloane's old home. They are greeted by Sloane's father, Henry. He then immediately splits into 5 different forms of himself. Whatever damage we deal to one of them, all of them receive. But also any healing that one of them gets, all of them receive. The group starts in a room to the southwest of the mansion. I split the party in 2, one group pushing north and the other one pushing east. I am able to quickly take out people to the north and actually surround one of the copies of the boss. Each copy tends to have at least a couple healers nearby, so it's really hard to do damage early in the fight. But soon I clear all the enemies aside from the boss in one of the rooms. The north group then splits off, with Bianca heading east to hopefully clear out some of the healers around the other copies of the boss. I begin wailing on the one boss that I have all alone while the others keep pushing to new rooms. I actually begin to do too well. The mansion is full of treasures, and I've only gotten half of it by the time that the boss is under half HP. I actually stop attacking the boss because my units do stuff like this.
That's a lot of damage!
I send Bianca and Monroe to push to the other treasures as they have high survivability. Bianca with her tankiness and evade, and Monroe with his lifesteal and stupid high HP. I decided to go for all the treasures as they have items like weapon tokens, which I haven't received in like a dozen chapters, as well as stat boosters and really good healing items. I cut it dangerously close and nearly killed the boss with some of the treasures unlooted, but I just barely managed to get all the treasures before I end up killing the boss. And the chapter ends and Henry is surrounded. He starts to give some evil monologue about monopolizing on people's deaths because it's inevitable, and then partway through, someone just shuts him up and kills him. The group then decides to stay at Sloane's old home as they prep to invade the Capitol building. In Chapter 24, Dark Deity, the group meets an inside man who lets them into the city of Sojourn through a back entrance. The group then needs to fight to the gatehouse to open up the gate for the rest of their army to enter through. The group starts in the top right corner of the map, and have to push south to get onto the top of the walls to lower the gate. I split the party into two. One pushes west and then south, and the other pushes straight south from where they start. Then they're all going to regroup, and they're going to take out the enemies on the walls. So I send a small group to west while the majority push straight down. The issue is that there are so many stands in the middle of Sojourn, and they create a bunch of little pathways everywhere, so it's almost impossible to move a large army. So they can just split off individuals who can handle themselves on their own, like Bianca. I also have Caius and Vestus split off, since due to Caius' 3 range attacks, he can pick off some of the enemies on the walls before he even get there. I have some small difficulty fairly early on with the middle left side, as there's a massive group of archers who all have either high damage or high crit bows, which luckily not all of them decide to attack me at once, so I don't get overwhelmed and manage to push through. Other than that, there aren't too many hiccups in my plan. As we get closer to the end, I place Liberty and Sophia in range of some archers so they can help take down the enemies on the wall. Sophia actually gets taken down by a lucky crit, but she uses magic, which she doesn't use at all, so I don't care, and I just keep going. Luckily, the wall is decently wide, so I'm able to fit most of my best units up there, and I quickly clear out the remaining enemies. The chapter ends, and the group prepares to enter the castle and finally defeat King Varric. In Chapter 25, Dark Deity, the group finally breaches the walls of the castle and make their way to go kill the king. As the chapter starts, I split the team in two because there's 2 different sides with enemies and loot. In the first room, I actually split the team in 3 because there was a small room with a couple of chests off to the right of the starting area. Literally turn 1, an archer shoots Sia, crits her, and kills her. Well, that sucks, but, turn 1, whatever. I reset, try again, because I just got unlucky. So I do the same strategy as last time, and Maeve gets crit by that archer instead, and dies. Okay, this time, I'm gonna send Bianca to fight the archer. And they didn't crit, and she actually makes it through the level. Or she actually makes it through the enemies. So I start pushing past the initial enemies, get to the second group of enemy, and Liberty gets crit twice and dies. Why? Okay, one more time. I do what I did last time, and Fenton dies. Whatever, I'm done. I'm just gonna keep pushing on without Fenton. This time, I'm a bit more careful, and I get through a second set of enemies. I continue to push to the left and right to gather all the items. After the first 2 sets of enemies, I didn't really have any trouble with the rest of them, and then I get to Varric. And Varric has 700 HP, high attack, can counter from any range, but he has no luck, so I don't have to worry about my units getting randomly crit and dying for the millionth time this level. Varric actually goes down pretty easily because Thalen, Bianca, Monroe, and Caius just do too much damage, and they quickly kill Varric. I mean, look at this. Monroe versus Varric. Monroe does like 200 damage of Varric's 700 HP. It's ridiculous. I've made a monster and I'm proud. The chapter ends and Varric dies, but the group gets transported to some weird location in between worlds and dimensions. Now they have to go and take down this necromancer because even though Varric died, the world is far from safe. In Chapter 26 of Dark Deity, the group begins to make their way through this weird place to fight the big bad sorcerer dude at the end. On their way there, they're confronted by an old enemy. Akmenos, the dude from the mansion and the battle from the two armies, and the dude that we fought on the mountain and we thought we killed. Yeah, well, he was actually in his staff, which is teleports him to this dimension. I don't know, it's a bit confusing. Either way, we have to go fight him again. Now, before the battle starts, I decide to spend all the resources that I've been hoarding. I have nearly 90,000 gold and countless stat boosters I just haven't used because I don't know why. Now is where I realize that you need to use the stat boosting items in battle, so I kind of distribute them around and I'm going to have to use them over these last few fights. And then I finally decide to spend my gold. I spent roughly 70,000 gold, probably enough to pay all war reparations from this brutal fight, on a couple of pointier sticks and a cool new book for Monroe. The battle starts, and a small group needs to be split off from the main party, and have to defeat Akmenos while the others try to survive an infinitely spawning horde of enemies. I sent my best squad of Bianca, Monroe, and Lincoln to go and take down Akmenos while the rest roll up and try not to die. There are multiple entrances into where my units start, and most of the entrances have multi-space wide, most of the entrances are multiple spaces wide, making them really hard to block. I send Helena north to block the only one space-wide entrance, and then I send Vesta and Thalen southwest, so as they are the group with the highest survivability, and they're taking on the enemies who would be entering through the widest entrance. I then use the rest to hold the center area. Now this strat works for a while, but soon my units start to get overwhelmed. I realized that probably taking two of my best damage dealers and a good healer away from my main group was probably not the best idea. Sia then gets picked off, and I decide I should probably rethink my strategy. I decide I don't need all these people to fight Akmenos. I decided to bring only one person for Akmenos, so then the rest could get their I get more units fighting the hordes. With this new strat, I bring Bianca back down, and she'll push up the south, and Lincoln can have more healing. And now it's just Monroe versus Akmenos, and he's perfect for this fight. I mean, due to Monroe's high damage, high HP, and healing on the damage he deals, he's actually able to solo this whole fight with minimal issues. I used the same tactic as before, but now Bianca replaces Thalen, as most of the enemies down south don't do a ton of damage, and Thalen's fighting the high damage archers in the middle. This actually goes really well, but then I underestimate some healers who end up critting Fenton and take away a massive hit of his HP. He loses 8 HP, which is about a tenth of his HP total. I decided to reset one more time and now learn to fear the healers. I mean, who thought healers would do so much damage? So just same strat again, but stay far away from the healers and only send in my most tanky units to deal with these healers. It goes a bit better, but she still gets hit by an unlucky shot and loses 1 defense. She only had like 10 to begin with, so I just keep going, not the biggest loss. As soon as the main enemy force is dead, the respawning enemies aren't too bad. Soon enough, Monroe finally gets the kill on Akmenos and the chapter ends. The group actually kill Akmenos this time, since he can't hide in his staff again as we're in that, and we continue through this mind-banging location to find the sorcerer at the end.
In Chapter 27 of Dark Deity, the group travels further into this weird realm that they're in. On their path to, I think, the deepest point in the realm, they meet the big bad wizard who has orchestrated this whole thing from the sidelines. He explains he's going to use the power of the aspects, which we accidentally brought right to him, to turn himself into a god. But from our sources, he's actually going to be causing like a mass extinction event, like Thanos Snap, but worse. So we prepare for a climactic fight. And then he decides to just summon some undeads and runs away again. One of those undeads is Sterling, Irving's brother, who died several chapters ago. So you have to kill him before proceeding on to fight the big bad mage Empyrean. The chapter starts, and it kind of looks underwhelming. It's a long hallway with a couple of strong enemies every 5 or so tiles, and then the big bad boss arena at the end. The battle starts, and at least the normal enemies are a total joke. Either that or my team is way too overpowered at this point. Every turn I can clear about a wave and a half of these enemies during the player phase. I'm starting to think this stage was just some more EXP before the final boss, since
I got a lot of levels with little trouble. Let's see. So the minions are easy, but maybe the boss is hard. Well, not really. He has the boss thing, which I love, of not being able to crit. It takes out the chance of just instantly killing my people. He has decent speed, meaning that for the most part I can't double him, but for the most part he also can't double me. His hit chance isn't that great, but his damage is decent. I almost feel bad for beating up on him, but I quickly surround him and wail on him until he dies, which only takes like 2 turns when Monroe and Sloan do like 130 damage per hit. The chapter ends with Irving putting down his zombie brother. The group has a moment to mourn Sterling's death, again, before they head on to go fight Empyrean himself. In Chapter 28 of Dark Deity, the game is basically over. This is the last chapter. Before we approach Empyrean, the group has a little prep talk, and I get my last upgrades in. I spent another 30k gold on stat boosters, which I'm gonna have to try and weave into the final fight. I don't know why, but this is where I decided to spend the last of my money. We approach Empyrean before he can complete Empyrean. We approach Empyrean before he can complete the ritual. It's now or never. Empyrean has 3k HP and a massive list of skills. He has defense boosters, 3 different AoE moves, regen, and so much more. The battle starts and I have my tanky people approach him, while the rest go to break some of these crystals that are scattered around the map. This is very difficult, as one of those AoE moves he has is in one square all around him, so I can't really approach him with my melee people. The other AoE moves he has, one of the other AoE moves he has targets 4 random people on the map and follows them wherever they go, so you just kind of have to take the damage. This is a problem, as normally you just kind of eat some food or have a healer patch you up. The thing is that most people don't have food because I filled up their inventories with stat boosters that I was going to be using throughout this level. So I basically have 1 healer for the tanking squad, 1 healer for the other group, and I pray that he doesn't do too much damage. It's only after the first turn that I realized that I only realized what breaking each crystal will do. The first crystal I break stops a regen, so at least people who are tanking can also slowly chip down the boss. The issue is that the boss does a stupid amount of damage. I mean, Helena is probably one of my tankiest characters, and she's getting hit for 65 per hit. Now, Empyrean isn't the most accurate, so I'm gonna have to probably pray for some dodges on this one. The other issue is that the AoE moves don't have an accuracy check, and are guaranteed hit. If you were to hit one of my people, and then they would get hit by an AoE, there's literally nothing I can do to save them. They're just dead. This is gonna be a rough one. Of course, Empyrean goes for Helena relentlessly, and is quickly able to land 2 hits on her before I can fully heal her back up, resulting in her death. I decide to keep going since it's only 1 death, and I want to see how the rest of this goes. I'm still getting a feel for the fight. I begin to target the crystals that give him his AoE moves, so I can comfortably tank his attacks. The next crystal I target is the one that reduces my healing by half, so I can fully heal my people each turn. And by the end of turn 4, I have half of the crystals destroyed, with the only ones left being the heal reducer, the tracking AoE move, and one that prevents me from double attacking him. Now I begin to focus on dealing damage, as it's a lot harder for him to kill any of my people. Once all the crystals are destroyed, I begin to stop him. I can out-heal anything he can do, and now deal several hundred damage a turn. I use the strat that I normally use for archers by creating a human shield around him, which forces Empyrean to attack people at the range that I choose, so they can always counterattack. Soon enough, turn 11, the boss dies. The chapter ends with Empyrean realizing what he has done. He makes a kind of noble sacrifice by getting us out of the realm as it crumbles around him, realizing that just because he died doesn't mean that we should too. With that over, the group returns to the real world. And now we get some sort of wrap-up stuff. Monroe is then made King of Delia, and the group begins to make their separate ways, agreeing to meet up if there's ever another threat. And that's it. Game's actually over. Personally, I love this game, and I plan on making more videos on it in the future, especially since after I beat the game, I learned there was a way to customize and randomize each playthrough. For now, I've already started on the next game in the series of these like short videos. If you watch my Twitch, you know what it is. I recently got a device that allows me to record Twitch games, so I'm going to be doing the weird playthrough that I thought of years ago. Fire Emblem Three Houses, the Golden Deer route, but without the Golden Deer. Gonna be a strange one. Looking forward to that. Probably it's gonna be Monday. And with that, I hope you all enjoy, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye bye.